Hello. Have you been playing Warhammer 40,000 since the 1990s? Are you a little bit tired of the competitive, ever-changing meta that you forcibly have to buy models to keep up with? Are you bored with 10th edition? Well, so is IDIC Beer, and he made a video about it, so this is my response. And no, I'm not trying to be snarky. I actually thought I could take a look at what he was saying, take a few notes, and go over what I think he can do about that. So Nick, big fan, number one. I'm just going to show you for a minute here. I really liked what you had to say about 40K. I liked what you had to say about the addition, the pluses and minuses of it. And I think I can sum up pretty quickly in about 10 minutes what I think you're running into and how I think you handle it. So Nick, this is the part of the video where I'm going to be talking more to you and answering you. And everyone else watching this obviously could apply to your games, your situation, I don't know. But this is really my response to Nick. The first thing, and I'm just going to tell you this is my opinion. This is my viewpoint of the situation you're running into. And I tend to not want to tell people what to think about a situation or what they should change their mindset or their viewpoint about something to be. I'm going to be evaluative here. I'm going to be giving you what I think you ought to do, what I think you're running into, and it can be totally wrong. So feel free to dismiss it. I don't want to override your choice on the matter. I don't want to override your evaluation of the situation. Okay, but here is my overarching point. You mentioned several times that the game had lost the fun element. It doesn't feel like a narrative game anymore. It doesn't feel like a storytelling game. It doesn't feel like a fun game. You mentioned a lot between the balance, constant updates, needing to buy new models, army lists changing, points changing, data slates changing, the trend the company takes in terms of Games Workshop making the models and actually making new mission decks and such. Well, here's the issue. The game itself is being portrayed as a competitive game. It is being made and it has been being changed into something where you need to have a viable and competitive list to be able to play. And for each army, those units and those models and those things that create that viability change every time there's a new mission deck, a points upgrade, a new codex drops. We've seen this for ages. You know, it's the good old codex creep, whether we like it or not. It's just slightly taken on a different form. I know where you're coming from because, you know, these were some of my old codexes. I've been playing since third, you know. I'm roughly in the same boat experience-wise you are. The thing is, that's not your style of play. That's not actually what you enjoy about the game. And I'm just extrapolating that from everything you've said in your video. You don't enjoy constantly worrying about objectives, constantly tailoring your army to fit the need to play secondaries or to win in a tournament setting or against a certain opponent. You mentioned a lot of the old missions in third and fourth, you know, having attacker and defender, having different setups, having different points. That type of gameplay is what you enjoyed most, and you're probably not the only one in that boat. The problem is you're stuck playing 10th edition 40K. What you need to do is go back to basics. And you mentioned a couple other points on this that I'll get into, like Crusade is obviously not the way to go about it, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I'm going to break this down and I'm going to get a little more detailed on the various points, okay? Narrative, the fun style play that you and I used to enjoy, basically, came about because you could just play a very simple game where you had maybe a single major objective. You didn't have a bunch of secondaries or a bunch of things that would shift around. It was a fairly standard game and you didn't have to tailor your army to it. You didn't have to show up with this list that you had math hammered out all night long and, you know, pounded 10 energy drinks to write out. You could just show up and play. You know, my friends, especially, you know, we were in high school, you know, we were teenagers, we were literally buying our armies with pocket change. We would literally plop down on any table we could find. It didn't vaguely look like actual terrain or an actual setup. And we would literally just call it a 12 and go. Center of the board's the objective, 12-inch deployment range. Roll off for who goes first, roll off for who deploys first. Okay, fine, there you go. And it didn't have to be super complicated. The thing about 10th edition is, despite the fact that it has all these rules built in for secondaries, for missions, for decks, there's no reason you couldn't take a mission out of a 3rd edition codex and tweak it to match the current universal special rules. Case in point, Space Marine Codex 3rd edition had a mission, which I'm sure you remember, called Planetfall. And the whole gist of this was, I'll just read quickly. Overview. Space Marines often carry out special missions that require them to make an assault from an orbiting spacecraft. Scenario special rules. Deep strike, hidden setup, victory points, random game length. Pretty simple for a mission back then. The setup was basically you have defenders deploying anywhere in the middle of the table, and you have 12 inches in any direction for the edge. And that's where, I guess that's even where you could deep strike your guys. And the whole point was mission objective. The Space Marines must kill all the defenders' HQ units and score the most victory points. Any other result is a victory for the defenders. Whether you break that down into unit points and kill points, taking out the HQs, which may or may not be different, that's a viable mission in 10th edition. You just have to ignore all the secondaries and ignore all the other setups and deployment types, okay? There's no reason you can't have homebrew type missions in games. There just really isn't, okay? You could take any mission in 3rd edition and sit down for a little bit longer than I just did here. That was really a one-off. And figure out how you would modernize it and play that kind of a mission. Some people aren't going to be into that. Some people love 10th edition, and that's totally fine as it is. But this is not for them. This is for you, okay? So the first thing is you need to start playing games your way. You need to stop worrying about the list and worrying about competitive settings. Play the games your way. You mentioned a couple other points. Constant updates, constant point changes, data slates, Munitorum points, all that. And you looked at it from the standpoint of, well, it does keep everything balanced, but at the same time, you then have to change everything. Again, this is the FOMO. This is the marketing strategy of Games Workshop, in that they want to sell miniatures. Okay, it's not about a game, it's about miniatures. And if they can find a way to make you buy units A, B, and C, and 6 months later, units X, Y, and Z are more tailored to the game, well, not only did they just clear out a bunch of backstock, but they have more money from it. I'm of the opinion that you should be able to buy a codex and play that codex for the length of the edition. And that everything you need, the points, the units, the rules, everything in there, it should be sufficiently play tested and workable enough that it lasts for the edition, like it did when you and I started in 3rd. Okay, this was the Space Marines Codex. It had a couple editions. It had the supplemental codexes for, you know, the specialist chapters like Black Templar, Space Wolves, Dark Angels, etc. But that was it. And that's all we had for, what, 5-6 years? We didn't even see another one until the 4th ed? That sounds like a pretty good deal. Even now, obviously, it might not be the most competitively balanced, but you should be able to take a codex, rules as written, points as written, make an army, play it against another one. There's no reason that wouldn't actually be workable if you're just having a fun game. So instead of worrying about all the updates and worrying about all the changes and worrying about fitting in a competitive meta-based setting, just play the game off your codex. Simple enough. Another point you brought up, it's getting kind of boring with terrain and setups. I couldn't agree with you more. I'm really befuddled as to why we see all these Gothic imperial cities in the middle of deserts, because it seems like everywhere you look, that's the terrain. I really wish I were further along. As you can tell from the background, I'm moving, so I really don't have a lot of my stuff accessible. But one of my big projects and one of my big goals is to make new terrain. And 40K as a universe is so diverse and has so much depth to it. You couldn't run out of things to do. You could make, you know, volcanic worlds. You can make oceanic worlds. You can make cities. You can make deserts. You can make ice worlds. You can make night worlds. You can make, you know, I'm going to go into the Star Wars universe. You can make Felucia. You can make a giant jungle fungus world. You can make asteroids. You can make Mars. You can make all these different types of environments. There's really no limit to it. You just kind of have to take the time and build it. And I know you've done that. I know that one like 10 or 12 player tournament you did at your house or whatnot, you were basically crunching to make all the terrain and make all the boards for it. You know, you've done some pretty cool Necron setups. Obviously, you're Necron themed, duh. But I mean, you could make more of those. You could make any environment you want, really, and just play on that pretty inexpensively. You know the ways to do that. We've seen all the guys like Eric's Hobby Workshop and Mel the Terrain Tutor and Black Magic Craft. The sky's the limit on terrain. You just got to make it. You just got to take some time and build what you want to build. So I would love to see what you come up with on that. I'd love to see you come up with a totally new battle environment to play on. Over to you, man. Maybe we make a competition out of that. Who makes the best board and terrain setup? It's an idea. I'm trying not to ramble too badly, but that's kind of what I come to, and that's what I think of when it comes to what you're running into. You're just not playing the game the way you enjoy to play the game. And you probably would find with some of your friends, they would want to try this with you. If you just said, instead of playing the missions, we're going to try like a 3rd edition updated for 10. You know, we're going to try this attacker defender thing. We're going to try this narrative mission. I think that's going to work. Sorry, I mentioned Crusade as another point. I don't love the whole tracking aspect of units and wounds and experience and buffs and all these other things. I think something you could probably try that you would enjoy. You remember the old Eye of Terror campaign? It was basically a map campaign. It was planets, so you really didn't have cities, you didn't have a map with tiles or anything, but you had various planets. You know, the end of the campaign was just who controlled the planet more, the Imperium or Chaos, or, you know, the middle factions or whatnot. Why couldn't you make a simple Dawn of War style map and just have a simple, you know, get a few players that want to do something like an escalation campaign for that? You have 4 or 5 players, you start out maybe combat patrol size as your first missions. You play a game every month, you upgrade, I don't know, 250 or 500 points every time you do. You end up getting to a max of 2,000 points or something like that. And you just have a simple map campaign, and maybe you make different environments, or you make a little bit of different terrain so it looks kind of like what you're representing, or maybe you do this in a city. But forget, you know, wounded units and buffed units and who gets experience and who gets all that. Just like expand the list, but just play it as a straight army that way. I think that would solve your problem right there. Anyway, I don't know that this is the most coherent thing I've ever done. It is about 2:30 in the morning. I didn't want to wait on this anymore, and I wanted to get my 2 cents over to you and kind of answer what you were questioning, what you were looking at, and I really hope that's done it. So that's my 2 cents, Nick. You just need to play the game the way you actually enjoy playing the game, and quite honestly, the heck with everything else. You can still, you know, tailor your list and keep up with the points and the data slates and all that and play tournaments and competitions. That's fine. But play the game your way a bit, man. You're going to have a lot more fun with it. You're going to get a lot of enjoyment out of it that way. You got this, man. I'm just going to stop rambling at this point. So I hope you liked the video. Any other thoughts, anything else you want to go over, please leave in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.